So today I wanted to talk about resilience. So I've been writing about health, mental health, wellness, resilience for over a decade now. And a lot of that has come from my experience of living with a chronic illness. When I was in my 20s, I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, and it took me about 7 years to heal and rebuild my life from that. Interesting twist. I was feeling, really good and recovered until I got COVID and then a few viruses after that. And unfortunately, I've now gone through a whole relapse of past health conditions, which has meant that resilience has become a really critical factor of my life again. And it's also meant that I've had to dig really deep around this topic, both in my own life and in my writing. But one of the things over the last 10 years or so that I've been sort of developing is a framework for resilience, which is a series of 5 steps that I believe whatever we're going through, that we can actually move through in sequence in order to actually help support our brain, our body, the neurochemicals that are going through us to enable us to come back to a place of calm, to a place of confidence, and even more importantly, to a place of like critical thinking. And so I want to talk about that first step today, which is about being real. Now, this is such an important step because I think in our culture, we're often sort of taught to soldier on, to have a stiff upper lip, and that vulnerability can be a sign of weakness, which is totally not true. And if you've ever read the gorgeous work of Brené Brown, you would know that she advocates that vulnerability is a strength. What I have found over the years is that not only is it a strength, but it's actually being real and honest about what you're going through with yourself and others is an essential first step to resilience. Because when we're not real, what we end up being is in a type of denial and also a type of resistance. Now, I have absolutely been through this twice with the two illnesses, experiences of illnesses that I have been through. But what's really interesting is that when we talk about being real and coming to a place of acceptance about the difficult things we're going through, we can often feel that acceptance is a type of giving in or giving up, or again, a sign of weakness. But when we actually look at the opposite of acceptance and we see this notion of resistance, what we start to unpack is, what does resistance do to our brain and our body? And what I found when I was going through illness is that when I was a bit in denial, the fact that I had a chronic condition that was not going away anytime soon, as the months and months and months and years passed by, is that you end up becoming in denial and resisting what is, focusing on what you've lost, hyper-focusing in my case on like the symptoms of the illness that I was going through. And all of that keeps us in that sense of anger and denial and resistance and scarcity and fear and anxiety, which activates our sympathetic nervous system, which is that stress survival state. The problem is that we don't want to be in that state for any great length of time, because it puts a huge burden on our body. It releases our stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, which can lead to inflammation and different diseases down the line. But the important thing to understand when we talk about the sympathetic nervous system is that it is this state of survival, and the opposite, which is our parasympathetic nervous system, is where we heal, where we rest and digest, and we're in that thriving state. So when we're not accepting and being real about what's actually going on for us, and we're resisting and suppressing and denying, we are activating that survival state, when what we want to be in is in our thriving, healing, restful state. And so by being real and honest with ourselves about how hard things might be, how much we're struggling, how unfair things are. I know the last time I've been through this last experience of chronic illness, anger has been something that's popped up for me that I was not expecting, just this unfairness that it's happened again after I finally got my life back on track. And so grief and disappointment and anger, they're all part of the adversities that we face. And when we're talking about being resilient, we can't step over those. We have to actually be real and to feel it and to let ourselves go into some of those feelings. I have a saying that we often have to unravel to then rise resiliently again. And that has been definitely true for me. But the thing around resistance as well that I wanted to talk about is that I've I've been talking to a few people lately who are going through difficult times in their life, and there's a lot of resistance around where they're at and where they think they should be at, and also noticing that things aren't working the way they used to. So I've sort of realized that resilience looks different at different ages and stages in our life, and particularly this notion that what did work before might not be working so well for you now, and that we can be sort of butting up against that resistance of like, this worked last time, or I have to get back to this habit. I had a friend who was going through a difficult time, and she really wanted to get back into the habit of journaling, but it just wasn't happening for her. And she was talking about, needing to go to the gym, and it was a lot of resistance around it. And watching her talk and watching her body language, I could see that there was nothing in her that really wanted to do that. And so I had a conversation with her and said, look, sometimes when we go through difficult times, we need to do different things. So the gym might work for you normally, but when you hit a really tough time or a dark time, it just might be too much. We talk about nervous system activation. Hitting the gym might activate you even further, and that what we need is more soul nurturing, different habits and rituals. So I was encouraging her, in order to re-inspire her journal writing, is to forget the gym for now until she feels more excited and more positive about that and has the energy to support that, is to instead get out into the beautiful sunshine and go for a walk, going as fast or slow as she feels on the day, to her favorite cafe where she'd sit and have a coffee or a tea and do her journaling, which is a beautiful example of habit stacking, that we incorporate something we already like to do, which might be that tea or coffee in a cafe, and then incorporate other things that we want to do around it. But it was a really interesting conversation because it reminded me about how much we can get caught up in the should-based thinking when we're going through difficult times. And when we are in an activated state, our brain changes. So the amygdala, which is a big part of our fear center, is really in the driver's seat, where the prefrontal cortex, which is like the CEO of our brain that does all the critical thinking and the weighing of the pros and cons, that part of our brain is really taking a back seat. And what that means is that we can stop sort of seeing the situation we're in clearly, which is why it's so good to have a sounding board in your life when you're going through a difficult time, whether that be a friend, a family member, or a psychologist or a coach. But listening to my friend, as an outsider, I was able to see the way her body changed, which was communicating things for her from her limbic system that she probably wasn't aware of. And we all do it, but we can bring awareness into our body and notice when we're saying should, or when we feel our energy drop, if we start to, touch ourselves, which is a type of soothing thing, which means that we are not feeling comfortable, which again is a sign of an activated state. We can use all that knowledge to actually build our own body awareness of what we need right now moving forward. So this idea of actually giving ourselves permission to let go of the things that might not be working for us right now, opening our mind to other things that might be helpful. I think sometimes we can sort of butt up against this idea that the other things that might work for us seem to be softer, more nurturing, and then it brings up, this resistance to self-kindness and self-compassion that we should just soldier through. And that's really not helpful when we're going through difficult times. So I wanted to encourage you, if you are going through a difficult time, is to think about what are the habits and rituals that you can incorporate into your day and into your week that are supportive of you, that help to regulate your nervous system. How can you be real with yourself and other people in your life to say, this is actually how I'm feeling? There was many times I've had conversations where I've said to my husband, I'm so angry that I've gotten sick again. It just feels so unfair. And it's really important to be able to release some of these emotions and thoughts, because they also carry their own stress, which again keeps us into that sympathetic nervous system activation. And when we can actually express and be real, and that, even crying is a great way to release built up cortisol, is that we sort of clear the decks a bit and create that spaciousness. We calm down our amygdala so that we can start thinking more clearly and finding solutions and connecting back into our inner strength. So I encourage you to be real where you can this week with yourself and with others, and to also start to be thinking about this notion of empowered acceptance around being real, which is about accepting your reality, that what is happening in your life right now that is hard. Why is it hard to actually accept that? What does it bring up? And then looking at how can you support yourself, which in my framework, the second step is about regulation, which is about, okay, how do we actually switch off that sympathetic nervous system overdrive so that we can come back to a place of calm and grounding as we navigate these challenging situations or times in our life. So, like with my friend, it was like, okay, what can you do? It's going to look like a walk and a coffee and journaling. It's not going to look like getting up the crack of dawn to get to the gym and do a hard workout, because that's what we feel we should do. Um, so being mindful of the should versus maybe the indicators that we're getting from our body, that that's not right for us right now. So I hope that that's been helpful for you as we explore these questions of resilience. How do we navigate change? How do we navigate difficult times? How do we ensure we can stay regulated through it so that we're calm, confident, and thinking clearly and critically? So I would love to hear how you've gone with these strategies, how you feel about being real and vulnerable and accepting of whatever's happening in your life. It's not an easy process, but it's the first step that we have to take in order to actually then build out of the difficult times that we're having. I look forward to hearing from you. Please get in touch and let me know how you're going and how you found these strategies.